Welcome to a podcast that brings together a group of interviews with key people from the heritage sector in Cornwall on the subject of careers in heritage. This podcast has been commissioned by Bord Ardach Cornwall, the Historic Cornwall Board, with grant funding from the UK Government through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. It builds on the Careers in Heritage focus to Cornwall's inaugural Expo Ardach Cornwall, the Cornish Heritage Expo, that was held on the 29th and 30th of September of this year, 2023. The expo was attended by schools and colleges from across Cornwall, and we hope that it inspired them to consider a career in heritage. As we'll hear in the podcast, there is a huge range of employment, training and apprenticeships opportunities available alongside the theme of Cornish distinctiveness. Whether you want to find out more about how to become anything from a Cornish hedger to a museum curator, a conservation architect, or simply want to find out what support there is available to you if you want to explore more of Cornwall's heritage, then this podcast is for you. We now speak to Ian Marsh, the National Trust's Southwest Assistant Director of Operations. Hello Ian, thank you so much for being here today. Could you tell us a bit about you, your background and your current role?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, nice to be with you. Currently, I am an Assistant Director for the National Trust and I have an area of responsibility, which is Cornwall. I did a degree in rural resource management, so my background academically is in sort of environment and countryside management. And actually, I did a year's placement with the National Trust as part of that, working on the South Downs. So that gave me an insight into National Trust. But then I went off and did some different things. So I actually worked at the Millennium Dome in London back in 2000 when it was the Millennium Dome before it became the O2. And that was a great experience of running a large visitor attraction. I went from there to the Eden Project back in Cornwall. Cornwall's home, so I've moved around a lot, but always come back. I worked at the Eden Project for a number of years. And then I moved up to Newcastle and I got involved in the museum sector. And I was operations director for a museum in Newcastle called Seven Stories, which is the national collection of children's books. So really tries to inspire children around reading. Then I worked for English Heritage. So I was running the West Territory for English Heritage. So that again on the operations side, so running properties and visitor businesses. Around 14 years ago now, I joined the National Trust, came back to Cornwall again and joined the National Trust as a general manager. And I looked after West Cornwall. So my role was to look after the West Cornwall area and the teams. And it was a combination of outdoor places and our gardens and mansion properties and industrial properties as well, actually, in West Cornwall. We've got mining sites, which are fascinating. And then a few months ago, I started in this role, which is responsibility for that broader Cornwall area.
Wow, it seems quite a long, extensive and quite a brave journey into leadership roles and quite inspiring big projects. So I imagine your day-to-day looks quite different, but would you like to tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, so I guess I could probably divide it sort of roughly into three. So I have a responsibility for being part of a regional management team in the National Trust for the Southwest. So collectively, we are managing the sort of Southwest region. The National Trust is a big charity, and there's always lots of national work to get involved with as well, and to sort of feedback on and be part of. Which is all quite interesting, and it can make a big contribution. So there's the sort of Southwest and the national side of what I do. And then I also focus obviously on my team in Cornwall, so the general managers and the broader Cornwall team, making sure that our properties run well, that our outdoor sites are cared for and well looked after, that they're safe and that they're compliant, and that we give great visitor experience, that we're doing really good things for nature. For carbon sequestration and climate change is a big focus for us as well at the moment. So making sure that we're across all of those things and also giving more and more and better access to our places as well. And then there's the sort of external side of my job. So that's, making sure that I'm working in partnership in Cornwall and more broadly, making sure that we're really joined up in terms of who we work with and the projects we do.
Thinking about your younger self or anyone younger out there, thinking about your career path, what advice would you give them, whether they have an interest in a career in heritage or in your kind of profession?
I mean, my route in was, as I say, through countryside management effectively. And I was inspired by Dartmoor. I grew up in Saltash, and Dartmoor was a regular place to kind of go. That's what really kind of made me want to work in the outdoors. And the National Trust has got that sort of we've got that outdoor and that environment side, as well as the cultural heritage side, the built heritage side. But I was quite lucky then that my career took me into cultural heritage at a certain point as well, and visitor attraction management. So I have those both sides, I guess, to sort of my experience. But it's all a bit accidental, and I would say to people who want to work in the sector, just try it. Try volunteer. There's loads of volunteering opportunities. And try a few things, try a couple of different things, because you really don't know until you've tried it what you're going to really be involved with. And I have a real passion for what I do. And I feel that through what I do, I can sort of make things better, whether that's nature, whether that's, as I say, have a contribution towards climate change, or whether it's about inspiring people with the past. And that's my passion, really. And I think you can sort of find that as you go along. So I would say, don't be afraid to phone someone up and say, can I volunteer with you? Can I try something? And even if your course is completely not relevant, or you feel like it's not relevant, it's not necessarily a barrier if you end up volunteering or doing some work experience or finding those opportunities.
Thank you for that. You mentioned volunteering as a valid route into the National Trust. And are there any other opportunities in the organisation as to provide training or apprenticeships or work experience that you could share?
Yeah, so we have an apprenticeship scheme which is mostly focused on building skills, heritage building skills in particular. So that's available. We've also worked with apprentices in countryside management and in horticulture as well in the past. So those opportunities are often available. In terms of volunteering, a good option, if you can access it, is what we call immersive volunteering. And that's where you come to a place and you volunteer for 6 months plus, probably 2 or 3 or 4 days a week. And you're really then, as the name suggests, becoming kind of immersed in the role and working alongside the staff. And particularly we offer that in our countryside management, in our ranger teams. And it's a really good way because we do a lot of practical work on our estates still. So our ranger teams are out there, they're kind of installing stiles and gates, they're repairing footpaths, they're doing compliance work and health and safety and risk assessment checks. So it's a good way to kind of pick up some of those skills and things that you need. So I'd say those are the main opportunities. If you haven't got the time or the ability to do immersive volunteering, you can still get in touch with a property and find out what opportunities there are to come along just once, or maybe once a month, or any combination really. And properties should always be willing to consider those options.
Is there something that you wanted to add that you feel like we haven't touched upon?
I mean, I think the sector is whether that's environment or heritage, whether it's cultural heritage or natural heritage, it's a great sector to work in. You find people with passion and you find people with shared values. I'd encourage anyone to go for it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Great, nice to meet you.
Great timing as well. And next we hear from Megan Arnold, a volunteer and community manager for the National Trust in West Cornwall. Thank you for joining this conversation. Tell us a bit about you and your current role and about your route into the job that you currently do.
So my name's Megan Arnold. My role is focused on children and young people. So my role is to engage anyone between 0 to 25-year-olds to see if we can find ways of working with them to bring them to the National Trust and make them feel welcome, especially prioritising groups that may face barriers to beauty, nature and history. Like a lot of people maybe in the National Trust, I came through kind of 2 routes into this role. I both volunteered for the National Trust, so I did what is now called an immersive volunteering position for about 9 months on the Lizard, where I worked, and I was really supported with training through that. And then I managed to get a kind of an entry role with the National Trust as a visitor experience officer down in Batalic, where you're working very much on one property and working with the team there, keeping that place open and making it welcoming to visitors. And then through that position, I climbed the ladder, which is so often the case in the National Trust. It's a very supportive organisation for kind of developing your career. So I went from visitor experience officer to senior visitor experience officer to programming and partnerships officer, and now to the position that I'm in, all kind of building on experience that I'd done in the past. And I'd say that the National Trust is a huge employer. There are over 1,000 different jobs in the National Trust, in all different areas. And there's so much scope to climb and develop once you're in there. And there's so many resources that people are really supportive. I was also very fortunate to just do a 3-month secondment while I was a visitor experience officer, moving from one mining site to work with the ranger team for 3 months. And that really opened my eyes to what else goes on in West Cornwall and made me really kind of determined to stay and work there.
That's amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Would you like to speak about what does your day-to-day look like? I imagine it's quite varied.
Like so many people, I would say that no day is the same when you work for the National Trust. My role is about kind of engaging with young people. I'm in this really fortunate position where I'm part of a trial across the countries. So West Cornwall is a trial site for children and young people, and that means we get to try and test new ideas of how to engage young people. And that has really ranged from working with Golden Tree, or kind of Man Engine fame, to design a new, really, it's going to be a fantastic tour at Eastpool Mine, which is going to involve Cornish language as well as a lot of the history and learning about dewatering mines. I'm also part of working with priority groups, so identifying schools that live in kind of areas of multiple deprivation or have high levels of free school meals, and working with them to welcome them to the National Trust. And one of the ways we've done that, again at Eastpool Mine, is just working with Sea Film and paying for licenses for the school children to watch some films in one of our places, so they feel welcome. And it's been really lovely, actually. We've got a few more of those booked in. Then also working kind of a bit more long term and in depth with Cornwall College. We've been funding transport to get to National Trust places up to an hour away from the college. So that's been kind of Lanhydrock to Cape Cornwall, to Lizard Point, and all the places in between, which has been fantastic. But we've also been working very regularly with photography and media from the college, and they've been documenting the conservation work on the L-shaped barn at Godolphin and been making a film for us.
That sounds really fantastic and like a really rewarding work. What would be your advice, for some of the young people that you meet, and also anyone interested in making a career in heritage or in your kind of profession?
Something that the Heritage Expo did so well was describing and sharing how many high quality careers there are in Cornwall. There's such diversity, and that you don't need to move away. There are such large organisations like the National Trust and working in Cornwall. So advice for anyone wishing to go into heritage, well, I mean, I never knew I wanted to work in heritage until I was there. I knew I wanted to work for a charity. I wanted to work for an organisation which kind of benefited others and nature. So that was really important to me. So values, organisational values were really important. And so that has brought me into heritage. But I would also say I work in conservation as well. That's really important to me. And I think that's becoming more and more important to people when they are looking for careers, is not just how much money you can make, but what actual difference you're going to make to society. We are in a climate emergency. I'd love to think that most people do have that in mind when they're choosing their careers. Nationally, the National Trust offers a huge range of opportunities. I can only really speak for West Cornwall. So the National Trust has a really good apprenticeship programme. There's apprentices that are taken on each year in ranger team, in the garden team, in IT. There's a huge amount of apprentices that go into IT, business services, and also craft apprentices.
That sounds amazing, so thank you.
The next interview is with Julia Twomlow, the Creative Director and Chief Executive of PK Porthcurno.
Thank you for joining this conversation. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us, how did you first get into your heritage work?
I'm Julia Twomlow, and I am the Creative Director and Chief Executive at PK Porthcurno, which is the Museum of Global Communications in the far southwest of Cornwall. My route into heritage was not the most obvious. I actually started out working in theatre. That was my first career, and even in that, it wasn't an intentional career. I ended up working in theatre. I started out working at the Minack Theatre as a performer, not 10 minutes away from where I am now. And after a few years working in theatre as a performer, I went into management, and I managed, again by accident, I ended up managing a capital build project at the Acorn Theatre in Penzance. I was in my 20s. So that was my first experience of management. And from then I carried on through performing arts, went into heritage sideways. I had the opportunity of doing a CLAW fellowship with the CLAW Leadership Programme. That was in the first year that they ran the fellowship in 2004 to 5. And I went in from performing arts and ended up coming out in heritage. One of the important factors is that I didn't actually have a first degree. So I dropped out of university. I was studying history. I dropped out of university, and I thought that was it for me, and went into the workplace. And then I got my experience kind of on the hoof by doing things, learning by doing. So when I went into a museum, I didn't have any museum qualifications, and I didn't have that degree, but I did have experience in other things. And I think that's really important, because actually, as I said, there are many routes into this work. And if you haven't gone down that traditional academic route, people often think that's me ruled out then, and it isn't. It absolutely isn't. I mean, I didn't do a degree until last year. So I was absolutely the oldest person in the room doing a master's, including older than the tutor. That's not a bad thing. It brings a different perspective, and you shouldn't rule yourself out because you haven't gone down that traditional academic route.
Yeah, that's actually really powerful, Julia. So thank you for sharing that. What is your role now, and what does your day-to-day look like?
My role now is extremely varied, and I think that's a symptom of it being a relatively small organisation. So, I mean, we are one of the larger museums in Cornwall, but museums in Cornwall tend to be quite small, to be honest. On a day-to-day basis, I head up a team of, the size of the team changes from literally from month to month, but at its largest, we're about 27 people in the team. Most of them are part-time. And I have the oversight on everything that happens. But with my creative director hat on, I look at all of the programming that happens. We have an engagement team, but I will have sight of what they are planning to do. I will be setting the exhibition programme. I will be deciding on other initiatives and projects that we might be driving forward, and really looking at how they all fit together and how they align with the ethos and mission of our museum. So where do they fit in our story? How do we take the story of Porthcurno and that wider story of global communications forward through our site, our exhibitions, our programmes, etc. So that's my creative director hat. Then I've got the chief executive role as well. As chief executive, I am mainly looking at the finance, the strategy, the forward planning, the big picture stuff, where it fits within the sector in Cornwall, the rest of the country, how we align our financial requirements, our commercial activities with our mission as a museum. So distinct hats, but they kind of come together as well.
They're kind of complementary, and the qualities of your leadership embodied in that creative practice and creative thinking that comes into it.
Yeah, and it works for me. I mean, in many places you'll find the two roles separately, but alongside each other. Some museums don't really have what they call a creative director role. It's a relatively new term, I think, in which I think is a good one to be using, because actually it recognises that in the programming that we're doing in museums, it's creative choices are being made. In some places you'll have two people. Here we just happen to have both, essentially because I feel comfortable doing both roles.
That's really inspiring. So thank you for that. So what would be your advice to anyone interested in a career in heritage or in your kind of professional role?
My advice for getting into heritage is that there are many ways in. I can't stress that enough. So as I said, I came from theatre into heritage. When I described that earlier on, I said I kind of moved sideways, and I did it via doing a CLAW fellowship. That's probably quite a facile way of describing it, because it was obviously much more complicated than that. However, what I realised, the big message I realised by doing my CLAW fellowship, was that my skills were transferable, so that just because I was working in theatre didn't mean I was stuck in theatre. Similarly, if a person is working in finance, or if they're working in retail somewhere, or in education, to think more broadly about how the skills that they have, the experience they have, might relate to a museum. I have got formal museum qualifications now, but I didn't when I started. I literally went into museums work with no formal qualification for working in a museum, and I gathered those along the way. But I did have a huge number of other skills around running charities, around financial management, around entrepreneurship, and how that aligns with charities, that kind of thing, managing people, all sorts of things I could bring to it. Just recently, I actually went back and I thought maybe I should actually get some formal training. So I did a really brilliant course with Exeter University. I did a master's by research in international heritage consultancy and management. Loved it. Got all the theory that I had been lacking in the last 20 years or whatever it was that I've been doing it. Quite a long time without the theory, and was able to align that with my practice. So bringing theory together with practice was really wonderful to do and very rewarding for me. It also made me realise that felt like the right way round, to actually have been working in the sector and to understand it on the ground was the right way for me, and then to bring the theory to that and to be able to reflect on it. So my take from that is get into working in a museum, even if maybe you want to work in a museum and the only job that's available for you is to get into the cafe or to get into the retail. Don't dismiss that, because those places are where people are talking. Sometimes it's the first point of contact. Sometimes it's the only point of contact somebody will have with that museum, and it might be the thing that gets them into it and gets them interested. So we really prize our retail, our hospitality, our front of house offer, because it is the place where they're going to have that public interface. And it's very often for people the way that they will take that first step into a museum role, and from there start to expand and to show other people in the team what they're capable of. Yes, there are some great courses out there at university. You can go and study museums, do museum studies, you could do heritage studies, all of these things. And there's nothing to replace experience. Absolutely nothing to replace experience. So do that, get into a museum. Not all of us can afford to volunteer. Not everybody can afford to do that. Some people, quite rightly, some of us, we need to be paid to work. But there are jobs there. We are, at the moment, we're going into our quiet season because it's winter. Coming into the summer, we are constantly looking for hospitality staff. We often have roles come up here at the moment. We recently advertised for a role around facilities, which is literally, we have maintenance people who work on the site, but overseeing some of that work. That isn't a traditional museum role, but every museum needs to have somebody who knows how buildings work, because these are buildings that are being used by the public. And that's incredibly important. And these are old buildings that are being used by the public. So that's another level of complexity. You want to work in a museum, look at the kind of roles that go into it. Not everybody can be a curator. We don't put on that many exhibitions. We put on lovely exhibitions, but not enough to employ a whole team of curators in a small museum. So
that's a really amazing advice and an invitation. You talked a bit about, some extensive experience that you've had and practice coming into it. But I guess maybe perhaps thinking a bit further at the youngest people thinking about joining, can you think about training or apprenticeships or work experience? I mean, you touched a bit on this as well. Yeah. So just speaking directly to the younger people, what would you say to them?
It's very similar. My advice would be very similar, is to think about what you have and what you're interested in, what lights your fire, really, what you're passionate about. So at the moment, for example, we have got a young person from Falmouth University who has been working in our cafe, who is a brilliant animator. She's an animation student there, absolutely brilliant. When we saw her work, we asked her if she would consider doing an animation for one of the exhibitions, which she is now doing. So that's an exhibition that opens in October. That is it's being sponsored by Vodafone, and her animation is being featured in this exhibition. That's one example, but it not only is it hopefully going to make a difference to her, because it's paid work to do that. We're not, we treat people as artists, and if they're younger, but it actually is a really brilliant addition to our offer as well, because it's a totally different way. So that's one example. In other things, we have a lot of young people who do come in and do hospitality work in the summer, and again we try to pay them fairly and we try to get them involved with what we're doing here. We also offer at the museum, we have various clubs and ways for people to get involved, and we have a young curators program as well. So if people want to get involved with curation, then they can try their hand at that. And things like our environmental program, Planet PK, if that's what you're passionate about, getting involved with something like Planet PK, creating program for that, creating content for our social media, that kind of thing is extremely welcome. We've featured photographs from young photographers in exhibitions. So it's really looking at what is it that I love, what is it I'm doing, either what I'm studying or what gets me up in the morning, and where might this fit?
That's so inviting and inspiring, Julia. Thank you so much.
No problem.
The following interview is with Sean Taylor, a senior archaeologist with the Cornwall Archaeological Unit, also known as the CAU. Tell us about your route into your current role and your career, your chosen profession, and just tell us a bit about you.
I'm Sean Taylor. I'm a senior archaeologist with the Cornwall Archaeological Unit. I fell into archaeology as a career somewhat by accident, although having said that, I did do an archaeology degree, but my degree was about a third archaeology, third physical geography, and a third environmental archaeology. And I really preferred the physical geography and the environmental archaeology. The straight archaeology I did was it was at a university known for its theoretical background and specialism, and I really didn't like it that much. I preferred the practical side. So I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do when I left university, but on the very last day, I bumped into someone who'd been on my archaeology course, and I hadn't spoken to him in 3 years. It turns out he came from Plymouth, just up the road from me, and he invited me onto a dig at Kitley Caves, a volunteer dig at Kitley Caves in southwest Devon, just outside Plymouth. Paleolithic to Mesolithic site in these limestone caves, really quite interesting. Right on my street, it was all sort of lots of paleo environmental work, and that just launched me off. Found work with extra archaeology, worked with AC archaeology, so did a lot of the digging circuit around southwest England. Not many jobs in Cornwall, which is where I'm from, so I was keen to get back there. A temporary job came up working with Andy Jones at Stannon for the summer, so I think that was about summer of 1999 or 2000. So it was only for 6 weeks, I think, but I jumped at the chance to get some paid work. So I gave up my longer term job with AC, came down and joined in. Really enjoyed it. And I'd already met Andy, I think, 4 years previously. We did a volunteer dig at Liscard School. So I kept in touch with him. Eventually some more work came up. I pestered him constantly for work in Cornwall. And eventually he gave me a job.
That sounds like it paid off. So anyone listening, I mean, should be as persistent.
That's it. Persistence is key. Persistence is key, yes. And being in the right place at the right time, that's even more key.
Yeah, well, that's a really fascinating start. So what is your current role then, and what does your day-to-day work look like now?
So, I've become a senior archaeologist, which is just, I think it's a term we give ourselves when we get to a certain age to make us feel more important. And mostly my job consists of managing projects, fieldwork projects, and mostly development. In the past few years, I've been managing some large infrastructure projects, the new works at the A30 between Chiverton and Carland, and the A391 link road from Snostal to the A30 around Roach. And I've had very little time for doing any fieldwork myself. Previous to that, I'd been managing some much smaller projects, and I'd be going out and joining in with the fieldwork as well. But yeah, that seems to have, with the bigger projects, there's just no time to do that. So I'm keen to get back on the smaller projects so I can get out in the field again. But yeah, no, it's been very enjoyable though, and we've done, like I say, we've done some massive projects, employed lots and lots of people, kept lots of money in the local economy by employing local people, and yeah, I feel quite proud of the work we've done in the last few years.
Yeah, and I feel like so you should be. It's amazing. So it's really great to hear from you. So now thinking about the younger generation, what would you say to the young people interested in a career in heritage or in your profession specifically?
For most archaeologists, field archaeologists, they generally start off with a degree. I don't think that's particularly necessary, and I'll go on to say why in a minute. What I learnt in my degree relevant to fieldwork was a 4-week training dig in the Severn Estuary at the end of my first year, and then I did a bit of volunteer field work in my second summer holiday. But coursework wise, very little of it is relevant to a career in archaeological fieldwork, as in excavation. That is the traditional path to employment. I think what the last few years has shown me, with we've employed some Kickstarter scheme is a specific scheme, so they're not quite apprentices, but they do get training, and it's specifically for young people between 16 and 24, I think.
Tell us a bit about it.
So we took on three young people. I think the youngest was 18, possibly the oldest was 24 when they started. They were all amazing. They were all very keen to learn. There was no formal training as such. There was no requirement to give them formal training. They were very much trained on the job, and they all picked it up very well. We took them on the summer of 21, and we've just had to let them go as the fieldwork's dried up. So the Kickstarter period, I think, was for 6 months, and then we kept them on for another year and a half with full-time work. And they fitted straight into the team. They were very keen to learn. They learned very quickly, and I think they've left with more fieldwork skills than they would have got in 6 years at university. So, very pleased with the way that's gone, and it's a very good route into the profession, I think.
We're about to hear from Emma Hosking, a senior architect at Point & Bradbury Wintercall Architects. Welcome. Tell us about your route into the work you currently do.
My name's Emma. I work for Point & Bradbury Wintercall Architects. We're based here in St Ives in Cornwall. Well, I always had an interest in heritage work, even at architecture school. In fact, my research term at degree level was repurposing an old building. But my degrees at that time were not set up for specialism, so my actual specialism qualification came a little bit later. To become an architect, you need to have 3 qualifications, and they are called Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3, plus 24 months of practical experience. So Part 1 is a degree in architecture, usually done at university. Part 2 is a postgraduate diploma or master's. And Part 3 is an exam together with your 24 months of practical training. So typically it's about a 7-year process, and that's before you specialise. For me, I specialised by learning whilst working in conservation with the RIBA, which is the Royal Institute of British Architects. And I did that about 6 years post architectural qualification. And it was one of the first courses they did in conservation specialism, so it was great to be in there from the beginning with them. And my qualifications now are senior architect and conservation architect.
It sounds like a long and dedicated route into your work, for sure. So what does your day-to-day look like?
I can manage teams on larger multi-million-pound projects, as well as solo running small household extensions. So with my practice, I've got a large variety of commercial, residential. There's a whole mix going in there. Every day is obviously very varied, and I may work on 3 or 4 projects a week at any given time. I spend my time designing buildings, assisting clients in making decisions for their projects, and I also run contracts on site. So I'm not always sitting at a desk. I can be out and about, and it gives me that bit of variety that I always wanted.
That sounds really amazing and beautifully intricate and complex, but also, really varied, and it demands of you a responsiveness to clients' needs. But also perhaps this is a good time to speak about Cornish distinctiveness and what is the importance of that in your role. Speaking of Cornwall and working from Cornwall, what does that mean to you, and how do you take that into account in your projects?
Well, I love the challenge of taking an existing building and repurposing it, because times change and buildings need to adapt to that. And it's taking the embodied energy that someone built 100 years ago, all that carbon stored in that exercise that happened, and then transposing it into the future. So it's bringing the story of the building all the way through, and it can live on in a whole other guise from what it was originally intended to be. But then we also do have the new buildings that come along, and a new building is the only way that a client can fulfill their requirements. The way we live and work now is different to the way we live and work then. So an old building is not always appropriate. We also understand the effect of the natural environment. So new buildings must reflect this, but they can still identify with their location, their genius loci, which is a spirit of place, and bring the spirit of place into the new buildings that we put forward today. And that could be using traditional materials, using local materials that are quarried within the county, and also employing traditional skills where we can.
That sounds, again, like an amazing dedication and relationship to the place. And, what advice would you give anyone that has an interest in this career pathway?
The first thing to understand is, even though it's anything from 7 years onwards, I personally took 9 years to get to my qualification as an architect, you can branch off at any time and diversify. You don't have to qualify the whole way if you decide it's not for you or you want to take a different path. The very first thing I would say is check out the Royal Institute of British Architects website about becoming an architect, and that can be found on architecture.com. Talk to any local architect and find out if they do work experience. We've all been through it. We've all had to find our own work experiences, so we are understanding. It's usually the sort of like the medium-sized practices, medium to large-sized practice that will do this. Within Poynton, Bradbury, Winter Cole, we do offer work experience opportunities, and we take on Part 1 and Part 2 students because we are aware they have to fill in their practical training record. We talk to students from school for perhaps their 1 week experience that they have to do at year 10. Students coming from the local colleges, and also the university work, and we may take them on maybe for the summer or for their whole year. So there's a lot of flexibility. We don't do apprenticeships because architecture is a university-based skill that you have to go through. But if anybody is local and was interested in some work experience with us, we're always keen to hear who's out there, what they're doing, and happy to spend some time talking to them, no problem.
Oh, that sounds like a great invitation. Thank you, Emma. That's brilliant. And now we hear from Jason Peel, who is the Business Development Manager at Cormac Limited. Good afternoon, Jason. Thank you so much for being here.
No, it's a pleasure.
Would you like to tell us a bit about your background and how did you get into your career and your profession?
I mean, I can take you back sort of 29 years or so. My background, apart from a very brief sojourn into high street banking, has always been commercial construction. I've worked on the operational side, the project delivery side, but predominantly on the business development side. I've done that in the UK for a number of years, but then I expanded abroad and then came back to the UK about 10 years ago. I've been in the Southwest, and I'm South Devon based, coming up sort of 4 years or so. So that's the background. How did Cormac happen? Well, Cormac a couple of years ago, because we're wholly owned by Cornwall Council, they realised that potentially the revenue levels for the civil engineering they deliver and the highways and environment services they deliver were going to be reducing, and subsequently it was decided that Cormac needed a plan B and a plan C, D and E. And on that basis, we decided to turn our people around a bit and face outwards into the commercial market. So we're busy leading, and I'm busy leading, a 4-year plan of external growth, dealing with the commercial market and opening up doors for Cormac in strategic areas. So we have a number of sectors that we're keen to develop on. Now, Cormac had never had a business development person before. Brand new role, which was attractive, obviously. So blank sheet of paper, and I was able to create some identity around the role and utilise modern day software and systems to allow us to have market intel and to track our activity. So I utilise what's called Salesforce, which is a CRM system, customer management system. I've brought Tussle into the business, which allows us to monitor expenditure for our potential customers. And I've also brought Glenigan's into the business, which allows us to track opportunities at a very early stage at planning and pre-planning phases. So we've got the suite of software systems which empowers us. I've been fortunate enough to open a number of doors for Cormac, including utility companies and like-minded organisations. So people like the Environment Agency, for example. And the focus, of course, has been Cornwall, but equally, We've been busy expanding our footprint into Devon, so we've now got a suite of offices and we've got a fully operational depot just outside of Exeter. And who knows, potentially we'll be looking to go a little further afield, and I'm thinking maybe Somerset or Dorset. We won't be going much further than that. So it's an exciting time, big expansion. We've committed to the council that we'll be delivering on that growth and predominantly those numbers. So we've got that commitment in place. And my background's working internationally and nationally as well. I've done some big projects in London, for example, shopping malls, hospitals, and you'll probably be aware of the new Wembley Stadium. So I did lots of stuff there. So all of that culmination of experience is helping Cormac to drive forward and deliver on its external business plan.
Well, that's really impressive and expansive, as you say. I guess your day-to-day role is varied. Do you want to tell us a bit about what your day-to-day looks like?
Well, I guess the cliche is no day is the same, every day is different. That's what everybody says. The reality for me is it probably splits into three. There's the new customer engagement, and with that, it does have to be strategic. We're not out there knocking on doors randomly. So we've got some areas of focus. So we look at housing and infrastructure. We look at assets and networks. We look at recycled material, potential to supply that. And we look at infrastructure. There's a whole degree of research and development that is required to understand an organisation, more importantly, understand the culture of the organisation, and do they fit the criteria of where we see our growth. So there's a fair bit of time that's spent doing that. I also have some individual KPIs around performance that is measurable, and I report into the company managing director, so I do one-to-ones with him. They can often stretch for a couple of 3 hours because we go into forensic detail. I'm in the midst at the moment of rolling out the systems I just described. So there's a program of rollout across the business, training for my colleagues, and some of that activity is brand new to them. A lot of people have been used to providing council services, but that's a changing world for us. So sort of teaching the commercial side and commercializing the sales and business development activity. And the final piece for me is the social value. So that's events, that's supporting organizations with volunteering and in spare time, and Cormac going along to the correct types of events to engage with the community and engage with the people. So some examples of that would be Disability Cornwall, their summer event. We go along and have stands and we film the event. Cornwall Pride, we do that on a regular basis. I've just done a 2-day expo with National Trust, where we engage with the school children and we engage with the general public. And of course, big events like the Royal Cornwall Show, where we're there for 3 days and we talk to the general public and put that public face in. So I'm committed to a number of days per year where I'm contributing to our social value activity.
Well, that's very, very important and relevant to the fact that you mentioned the expo, which was the focus of the historic environment team. And it was really looking at the historic environment, the buildings, the structures related to heritage in Cornwall. So speaking a bit about that, are there any roles that you can speak of that reflect the connection, or projects that reflect the connection to the historic environment in Cornwall and heritage in Cornwall?
The first thing I would say is we're very lucky to live where we live, with that level of heritage, legacy and history. Now, for all my talk of external activity and brand new customers, we are still a business that is wholly owned by Cornwall Council. And on that basis, we must still deliver our fixed term contract for high-rise environment. And part of that delivery is to get involved in heritage sites. And we have dedicated departments that specialise in things like bridges and traditional structures, where we have to maintain and improve and enhance those environments. So it's part of our work to do that. I'm increasingly getting myself into new arenas and new networks where people specialise in that type of work. And it is a very interesting field. So I know when we were at the expo, we spoke to Crest, for example, and all the traditional skills around retaining walls. Well, we design retaining walls and we install retaining walls. So there is a natural tie-in with that type of traditional work. And it comes with the very nature of the contract that we deliver.
The audience for this is hopefully the younger generation that is aspiring to careers in Cornwall and in connection to their heritage. So what advice would you give anyone, and particularly younger people, in pursuing a career that leads to Cormac?
Well, Cormac, in essence, are a traditional but very specialist civil engineering company. And with that comes many facets, many different departments and many technical capabilities. It's interesting because I talked about social value in my community engagement. Part of that is careers fairs and school days and engaging with the school children of the community. In actual fact, at the expo, the Friday was all about the coach trips, and we had many hundreds of school children come and talk to us. For the younger people, it is a long-term career in civil engineering and all of the specialisms that entails. So that's everything from design, some of the technical services we provide, like drone surveys, asbestos surveys, ground surveys, geotech surveys, all through the design process. So it could be a major road scheme, it could be a major bridge installation, anything that's related to a civil engineering capability. We've also got our own quarry, so we manage recycled products and send that out across to the schemes across the county. And then, of course, we've got the core competence, which is the major civil project delivery, and people will know us for our surfacing and fixing the potholes on the roads and all of that. So what Cormac gives you is the capability to experience all of those things and develop your career in a specific direction that you choose to do so. And I have to say, we've expanded our apprenticeship scheme quite significantly over the last few years, and we have dedicated resource that manages those teams. And we've also expanded our graduate training program, which includes time during each month up at Exeter University on a placement for I think it's a week a month. And of course, you come out with the professional qualifications at the end of it. So we're fully committed to it. We're fully committed to expanding it. And equally, we're very proud of it as well. What I would say is Cormac are very approachable. We have people that have been in our ranks for 30 years, and we've had people that have been in our ranks for 30 days and everything in between. But we do seek to have long-term engagement with the employees that we take into the business. Ultimately, if you look at our objectives, it's about improving the community and improving the lives of the people in the community. I talked about the social value in our community engagement and our volunteering. Those things are very important to us, and we do have those as measurables for each of us, including myself. So if you want to come into a business that can be long-term, can be a career, can give you some identity in the community, but also improve the area that you live in, then Cormac is a great option for you. And we'd certainly welcome any conversation. Please approach us. And I will do one final plug. We've literally just launched our brand new website, which is cormacltd.co.uk. We're very proud of the new website. And if ever you have any doubts about what we do, please do visit the website, see some of the filming, some of the video footage, and more importantly, some of the case studies of some fascinating projects. And that may just spike your interest into a career with Cormac.
Sounds like great timing. So thank you so much, Jason, for that. Much appreciated.
No problem. Thank you.
Let's hear from Helen Bowkett, who is a co-founder of the Cornwall Rural Education and Skills Trust, known as CREST, and also the secretary.
Hi, Helen. Lovely to meet you. Would you like to tell us a bit about your background and your journey into your current work? How did you get into the heritage aspect and the job you currently do?
I've been very lucky that I've been able to follow my passions in life, and I've always had an interest in traditional work, traditional craft. I think I must have said a very long time ago, I don't quite fit this century. I just love tradition. I just love those old skills. So I trained as a boat builder in traditional boat building. I had a sort of many years working in gig rowing and gig rowing development. I just loved the tradition of that sport and that lifestyle and the craft around the boats. And I trained in upholstery and traditional craft. I always gravitated towards craft, but I also needed work outside. So I became, after I'd had a kind of worked in outdoor education for quite a long time and funding, bid writing and various sort of other things, I just needed to work outdoors again. And so for me, I became a gardener and very, very quickly into landscape gardening. And from landscape gardening, I learnt how to build hedges. So that's where I am sort of today in teaching hedging. So it was basically a journey through a love of craft and working with hands and outdoors and tradition.
That's so fascinating and inspiring, really. I am in awe of your passion and your journey as you described it. So that makes me curious to hear, what does your day-to-day work look like?
Well, my day-to-day work now has sort of changed. So my personal day-to-day work as teaching hedging, so my day-to-day work this week and last week was basically working with a group of people that have come from a variety of backgrounds and ages and abilities, helping them learn this craft. My day-to-day working life is a real pleasure at the moment in that. When it's not raining, when it was raining yesterday,
Yeah.
I might have said something different yesterday, but today
I'm
the sun came
sure.
out and it was great.
Seems like you really are connected there with the elements of the outdoors, but also the materials. So that is actually quite moving as well in connection to the Cornwall's landscape and heritage. So would you like to share your experience about how do you envisage keeping rural crafts alive for people interested, young or of all ages, that may be thinking in taking up this as a passion or as a career? What would you tell them?
I came together with a group of Cornish hedgers and we founded this year an organisation called CREST, which is the Cornwall Rural Education Skills Trust. We founded that because we knew our craft of hedging was endangered. We were already working towards it. And then as our craft became registered on the endangered list, we sort of realised that we really have a kind of responsibility that we really want to sort of follow and protect our craft. And it's not just hedging, it's like hedging is the cornerstone of CREST in its work and the training that we deliver. But really we know CREST will develop to be able to embrace all rural crafts and skills because so many of them are under threat. And the whole thing is that craft is like a doorway, it's a portal into a connection to the landscape. And the connection to the landscape with it brings a sense of belonging to the land, and it's in belonging to the land that we feel at home where we are, and when we feel at home we're at peace within the work that we do. So there's so many layers that come through the craft of just working with your hands and being in the landscape and being content within that place. So not just hedging, there's style building, there's fencing, there's hazel hurdle making, there's granite stone dressing. There's so many rural crafts that a lot of young people are looking to kind of work in that world. Heritage Crafts, who we worked with and who supported us in our early training, they just confirmed with us that they're finding that young people do want this. There's plenty of young people out there. The amount of times they come forward and say exactly what I said when I was young, which is, I don't fit this century. So what they find through craft, through training, is a sense of belonging, in their homeland, in their county, in Cornwall, in their roots, in their heritage.
For young people, but all people alike, finding a sense of connection and purpose is perhaps central to our human existence. And we live so much in a digital world, and crafts seem to be a thing of the past, and yet here you are really presenting such an important alternative to connecting to the world and to oneself in the place, where we live, which is Cornwall. And yes, it's about exploring opportunities for training, apprenticeships, volunteering that you know of that would be available.
That's right. And the important thing is, especially with hedging, is the demand for the work is really high. So we're sort of promoting and preserving a craft that is a contemporary business model. You can make a livelihood from this craft. The demand for the work is high if the quality is good. And that's what we are working to promote. We are so fortunate to be partnered with the Cornwall Heritage Trust, who are just fantastic partners for us. They have really given us that sort of foundation and hand-holding for us to take this project forward. And we are funded by Cornwall Area of Outstanding Natural Beauties Farming and Protected Landscape Funds. Now, that partnership with Cornwall Heritage Trust and the funding through Cornwall AONB has allowed us to have a project that is full of training and education. So what all of our training opportunities are about supporting someone to come forward, if they wish, to go right through that craftsperson's path to becoming a working hedger. Now, also within that, we are looking to develop a group of trainers. We need a bank of trainers. So we also are looking for hedgers that wish to be trainers, but also maybe trainers that are already in the landscape that we can train to be hedgers that can then co-deliver with us. So it's basically looking for those like-minded people that want to work in the outdoors, have that passion to pass on skills and working with the hands. Within that project as well, we have a work experience element that we're working on various sort of local farms in Penwith and stretching beyond. And that is where we will be able to support trainees as they come through training to then come and work with us in real life scenarios, mending a section of hedge, and that will include surveying farms and a lot of work. But we're basically giving those trainees every opportunity to support them in their practice and their work experience to make sure that we build confidence in the skill, so that we're building hedgers that are confident to go out into the working world. There's a primary schools project within there, which is going to be great to engage with young people. And we are also going to pilot work experience for sort of year 10, which will be a small pilot within it. But we know we want to develop that further, because we know there's young people out there that are questioning, what am I going to do? The recent expo event was amazing for that. The amount of young people saying, how do I do this? So we know that demand is there. We've found some of the young people coming forwards as well have got that real sense of urgency in terms of where we are in the environment, in terms of climate change. They feel it. They really feel it. They've grown up with this being very, very real for them. And I think we're so fortunate as hedgers that the craft is a skill, like many rural crafts, that tread very lightly on this earth. So we're working with our hands. We're not using diesel particularly, we're very, very low key, low impact, low carbon footprint. And that whole sense of, we're like the natural recyclers using the waste products. We're using kind of waste granite from building sites, waste infill, waste subsoil, and creating something beautiful from recycled materials with very little impact on the earth. And for our younger people particularly, that sense of integrity about their working life because of that is coming through as a really strong theme. And for some of us that are older, that have had that kind of wake up that, oh my God, what is happening? And to have that sort of clean conscience about what you do in your working world,
Absolutely, right, livelihoods for perspective, yeah.
Yes. So yes, through our partnerships and through the support, we've got, a really good, exciting project for the next 18 months funded so that we can deliver this training. We're already finding that there's a definite demand from young people for this training, and also a very obvious kind of change of career point for some people that, for whatever whatever, they may just need to change a career, or they may have come from a struggle and they need to change a career, whatever it is that's taken to that point where they just think, I need a different lifestyle. I need to feel better within my working life. And so we're definitely getting that sort of, being able to support people when they're looking at a different life.
Yeah, thank you so much, Helen. That is so valuable, and your voice and your experience and your perspective there is very much needed in our to round off the really varied perspectives on Cornwall's heritage opportunities, and it sounds very much alive and thriving in your world. So I'm really grateful we had this chat. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Last, but certainly not least, we'll speak to Lisa Neville, who is the current manager of Educational Business Partnership at Cornwall Council.
Tell us a bit about your role and a bit about yourself and your background.
Hi there, my name is Lisa Neville and I'm the current manager of what's called Education Business Partnership. And we work within Cornwall Council to support schools and colleges and the children and young people that attend them to help them towards their chosen career, or to even discover what they might be interested in as a career. Because obviously for children and younger people, they may not have a very big idea yet of what they want to do. So we do a whole range of different events and activities, always where we can, trying to involve employers and businesses and organisations that we can actually introduce to children and young people, so they can see for themselves real people that are doing those jobs. And they're always surprised actually about what is really out there. Often they'll look at what's around them in their community, but there are so many hundreds of jobs that are hidden from them. So yeah, we always try and take them to places or introduce them to real people who can tell them a bit about what they do. My background is, I've been in this job for quite a while. I've worked for Education Business Partnership for a long time now, and because it's such a varied role, so I don't really have one day that's the same as another day. We can be organising events in school, so we often do careers fairs or bring employers into the school, and we'll run activities with them as well. So we don't just like to talk at children and young people, we like to give them an opportunity to get involved in something, to get their hands on something. And we sort of work with the employers to come up with what that might look like. So if you were to come in and see one of our events in schools, you'll see lots of activity, lots of engagement between, sometimes quite young children or teenagers, a whole range of ages, but talking directly, whether it's to somebody who's, running a company of their own, or they've been in a job for a long time. And sometimes we bring in apprentices and students as well that are not that much older. And that can really help young people to think, well, if they can do it, there's nothing to stop me doing it. Prior to this role, I was working in a sort of connected business to heritage. I used to work in environmental conservation. So I would take groups of young people out to actually work in the environment, to plant trees and to learn about the environment and to do practical work. And then before that, I was in the fashion business in London, so something completely different. But I think what's worth saying here, Anne, is that for all of the jobs that I do now, pretty much all of them have been as a result of either work experience or volunteering. So I would say that that's been really powerful for me. So I'm a great advocate for supporting children and young people to look at those opportunities and ways to get into different jobs.
That is really inspiring and energizing to hear. And today, we have a focus on heritage. So thinking about heritage in Cornwall, what advice would you give anyone interested in pursuing a career with a heritage focus here in Cornwall?
I think the first thing to say is, living and working in Cornwall and growing up in Cornwall, it's the most fantastic place to be in terms of the opportunities that we have created here with our history and our culture. There's actually a huge range of different options for people to consider when they think about the heritage sector. It covers such a wide range of opportunities, some that you perhaps wouldn't even think about. So referring to the the Cornish Heritage Expo that happened in September of this year, I think we were all surprised. I mean, one of the things I like about my job is I'm constantly surprised about the range of different people and jobs that there are out there, but everything from construction. So, you know, a lot of young people wouldn't consider construction necessarily to be something that's connected to heritage, but it's absolutely vital that we keep those skills going. And architecture as well, making sure that our buildings are designed to look as if they're part of the landscape they're already in. But also we've got lots of different volunteering organisations, museums, and so many. It's almost impossible for me to know where to begin, to be honest. You just have to literally look around you and see. I mean, I'm looking out of the window now, I can see this amazing landscape of Cornwall, and you know, the range of opportunities from Cornish hedging to working in, you know, historic buildings. We are blessed, I think, particularly in this area of the range of different opportunities there are in heritage, from the sea to the land to the built environment. You know, that I don't know if that covers what you were asking, but it's almost too big a question to answer.
I really think you have shown the broad range of possibilities within the heritage careers, and throughout the program we'll hear from other professionals, so that's really great. And I was just wondering, as part of your role, is there for a support for young people or people that are interested in changing careers? And what do you suggest that there is out there?
I would say it's a slightly different message depending on your age. So I've mentioned already that we as an organisation, Education Business Partnership, work with schools and colleges. And so we will actually bring in events and activities on site in the school to introduce them to people that they can become aware of, whether that's volunteering or work experience. They can really explore different opportunities when they're younger. As you're getting older, and certainly my experience of getting or changing track in terms of my career and an interest in heritage myself, is the vast array of volunteering opportunities that we have, not just here, I mean, across the whole of the United Kingdom, but we are very lucky here that we've got a huge different number of ways that you can get involved. So volunteering, I've found a really effective way to immerse yourself in something that you don't have to commit for very long either. You can do it for a fairly short period of time to almost try something out, see if it fits for you and if you fit into that environment. And if that one doesn't work for you, so let's say, for example, you've done some volunteering in a museum, you know, you might decide that that's not the area for you, but maybe volunteering with the National Trust in one of their historic properties, you know, could be an option. And I know you're speaking to different people about those different opportunities. So where you're a young person, you can speak to your teachers in school as well. Your friends and your family, and you've probably been to visit a lot of these great places. Sometimes I think young people have seen them in the past as somewhere to play and enjoy and to explore, but there are people that work in those places to make them available to us to play and explore and sort of investigate. So to start to look behind the scenes of, you know, who can I talk to and who can put me in touch with the right person to help me contribute to this in some way.
I get a sense that what I'm hearing, that really organizations are really open to receiving interests, be it through applications, via volunteering opportunities, or even receiving people's CVs and interests. There is that open door invitation there to get involved and get to know the organization in the many different roles available.
When I moved from London to Cornwall, like I said, my life before that was in fashion, completely different. And one of the first things I did when I came to Cornwall was I volunteered for a conservation charity and did a few months there, and then a job came up, and it actually, you know, gave me an opportunity, once I'd done that volunteering, to move into something that I'd no experience of before, but they gave me training. They used the skill set that I had. So at the time I wasn't working when I moved to Cornwall, so very quickly after volunteering I was able to actually get a job out of it. I would say, particularly something like heritage, there is something there for you no matter what age you are, and just to ask questions and be curious and, you know, knock on people's doors and write letters and, you know, send messages via social media just to find out more about how you can get into it.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Lisa.